Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a new tier list for all roles. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out. Excuse me. A ton on the channel. If you want to see more content like this, we do patch notes, tier lists, champion guides, topical guides, coaching sessions, releasing all sorts of content every day, and we stream every night starting around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and usually go till about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to check all that out. And I will have a link right at the beginning here to my support tier list, which I released yesterday. So I'm going to go over support super fast early on, but if you want the more in-depth tier list just for support where I go over the top 15 supports, be sure to click on that link. I just don't want to rehash all of that again because we have a lot of champions to cover here, and I'm trying to make the videos a little bit shorter. And then at the very end, I'll have a link as well to the recorded stream playlist where I put in timestamps, and you can just kind of flip through and find your favorite games that you might want to watch on there. And then I'll have a couple of other guides linked at the end as well. So be sure to hang out at the end for some links to other content. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So as far as support goes, I think that Yumi is on top. I talked about this a lot in the support tier list video, but she got a small buff on this patch. Just the meta's just shaking out really well for her right now. A lot of people are just kind of farming off in the early game, and they're just really not putting a lot of pressure on her. You're seeing a drop in picks on champions like Leona, on champions like Nautilus specifically. You know, as those two are dropping quite a bit. She has a pretty good game against Thresh, like in lower elo brackets especially. In higher brackets, Thresh can flay if he's fast enough to, you know, grab her when she's trying to reconnect. And his flay can stop her from getting back on people, so that is sort of problematic. But she's basically just a time bomb. The problem is she's good in like any situation in the mid to late game. If you're behind, she's still one of the best supports when you're behind because you don't have to buy boots, so you save 900 gold. So you're still going to be able to get your Ardent. You're still going to be able to get your Athenes. She has the heal, of course, but it also has movement speed. It also has attack speed. She also adds flat damage in terms of either AD or AP adaptive. She has an AoE, like huge hitbox piece of CC that CCs people for 1.75 seconds. So she's just got everything. You know, the AoE CC, the buffs for attack speed champs, the buffs for assassin type of champs. She synergizes with mobility really well. Anyone else that jumps around or turns invisible or just does anything really, she's going to follow them and take advantage of that. So she's just really, really strong. You have to hard punish her in the early game, or you have to run a comp that is coordinated but sort of just gets the enemy to spread out and just pretty much never team fight. So if you run like a double assassin with a split pusher comp or something, you know, you've got a Kha'Zix in the jungle, a Zed mid, and then you've got a top lane Singed or something like that. Just it's going to put a lot of pressure on the map and not let them group up for fives. And that's probably the best way to go against her, but most people, you know, particularly at gold and lower, are just going to ARAM in the mid to late game, and that's what she's best at. So it's just very, very difficult to deal with her. So that's why I have her up there. And it's just, in team fights, you can't target her. I mean, that's the thing that is the hardest thing to balance around her, and it really sets her apart from a lot of other supports, is she has all these different ways that she can contribute and win around different win conditions, whether it's Vayne that's ahead on your team, or Darius, or Diana, or whomever, but then you also just can't target her and kill her. And in team fights where you have 5 different bodies you can jump on, she's going to be the last to go down with the ship, so she's just constantly putting out value on everyone until you kill everyone most of the time. So just very, very difficult, and it puts a lot of pressure on the enemy to have a very special game plan to deal with her that just is not as necessary with a lot of other champs on the list. Okay, Soraka's the other one that I mentioned in the support tier list. Very similar to Yumi. You're probably just going to win the fight if it goes late. You have cheap items. Now, she does apply more pressure in the lane than Yumi does. She has pretty good wave clear with her Q if you want to push and try to get priority. If you're in a tough lane where you're getting poked out, she can heal through that better than almost any other support. And then in the late game, if they don't kill you, you're just going to win the fight because you just put out so much healing with the 2-second cooldown on your W. And there are a lot of defensive tools that she has now that people are starting to employ. So more and more people are running Guardian, Barrier, Boots of Swiftness. So there's just a lot of stuff that makes it difficult to target and focus fire out and blow her up. She also does really well with Mikhail's, which A lot of enchanters don't get that regularly in their kit, but because she benefits so heavily from plus healing and shielding, because she puts out so much of it, and that means that she can cleanse people like an Ash Arrow, which is super common right now, coming in for engage, or like a Leona engage, a Thresh Hook, a Lulu Polymorph. There's a lot of CC out there that Mikhail's does really well against, and it fits right into her kit so well, because she also likes to get Redemption second item most of the time. So you can get that instead of Athene's. Athene's is still pretty good on her, but Mikhail's is definitely, she's the best support to get a Mikhail's, I think, just because of how it synergizes with her kit. So that's just very good in the meta right now overall. Lulu's another one who's super strong right now, and I talk about a lot more in the support tier list, but basically it's kind of like Yuumi Light, where she also has an ability that gives move speed and gives attack speed, just like Yuumi, but she can also polymorph people with the W. She has a shield to go with that, with her E, and then she has the ultimate, which is a nice little boost up. The reason that I have her just a little bit lower is she's all about that single target. So, you know, Yuumi has the AoE CC ult, and she can jump around to different people and buff up different people in team fights, and she's untargetable, whereas Lulu's a bit more vulnerable, and she really just puts all of her stuff on one target. You know, you want to be putting your Whimsy on somebody to give them all the extra attack speed and things like that, and putting your shield on the same target, so that when they're attacking really fast, your Pix is doing more and more and more damage. And Pix does a lot of damage. I had a game yesterday where there's a diamond and there's this kind of this ADC Vayne who did really well, and she was just like, man, I wish I had, you know, at the end of the game, I don't remember what my scoreline was. It was like 3-3 and 27 or something like that. And she was popping off. She was like 15 and 4 or something. And then she was like, man, I wish I had a hook champ instead of this brain dead Lulu or something on my team. And that's just, a lot of people don't understand just the value of picks and her W on them. And I calculated it up, and with Ardent Sensor in there, and I don't remember, it's like level 11 or something, you're contributing 4,500 gold, you know, just based off the attack speed and the on-attack damage that you give and all this stuff. I was basically giving her like 15 kills or something like that worth of gold. And that's the thing with Lulu, is you just give out, but people don't realize that they're not going to respect you most of the time. And that's fine. I don't care. I just want wins. But I did clarify that for the stream, like, why enchanters are so strong. And I will probably have a link at the very end to enchanter itemization of this video if you want to check that out, and what makes enchanters strong and why they're so good, why they're almost always one of the highest win rate champs in most elo brackets. But Lulu, you have somebody that hyper scales, especially with attack speed, that's going to be getting Hurricane, Gensus, that type of stuff. She's going to be really good. Or just people who just want to attack a lot. So that's like Vayne, Twitch, Kog'Maw is historically super good with Lulu, Jinx, a lot of those even Ashe, a lot of those champions are coming back into the meta a bit more. So you are a bit more reliant on an auto attacker to do very well. Like, she's not as strong with like a Fed Zed or a Fed Katarina or something like that as Yuumi would be, or you know, a couple of these other champs, but she's still going to be really good in a lot of those situations. Okay, Karma's another one that I think is kind of sliding under the radar a lot, who's really strong right now. The thing about Karma, and she doesn't have a great win rate, unlike some of the other enchanters, is that she just pushes so well in the early game. You can just push, put them into the tower, and just poke them under tower if you want. But then she has the movement speed for protection for both you and your AD carry if you're getting ganked, if you use the overcasted shield. So she can push, she can poke really safely and effectively. And in team fights, she offers some pretty good utility by being able to speed up your entire team and shield your whole team to go in. So she's really good with a lot of these meatball type of champs out there, the Darius, the Garen, just a lot of these champs that want to run at you. She basically gets a free Shirelias built into her kit, and she just provides so much pressure in the early game because she gets an ult level 1 effectively. It does a ton of damage. So if you want to pressure a lot, but you also want some pretty good team fight potential later on, Karma's going to be a good option there. And then Janna's the final one that I'll mention. I don't know what her win rate is right now. It's still pretty good. It's 52.45. And she's very good if you need someone who's super mobile that can rotate around the map. So if you're doing like a split push comp, if you need deep vision in the enemy jungle to help protect your split pushers, or to help give your assassins some good visibility so they can make picks, then Janna's very good because she's so fast off of her W, and she has so many disengage tools with her Q and her R that she can safely, against a lot of comps, get in there, get that deep vision, clean out vision that's a little bit more dangerous, and just really establish control in that way. And then, of course, in YOLO Q, she can just run around so fast, show up to a fight, chip in a shield, chip in an ult, and really turn the fight around. She can get people out of situations. They get the extra movement speed when they're running towards you. You can tornado to peel. So she was very good in the YOLO Q, where you're just constantly running around trying to put out fires, and you scale really well. She's good at protecting towers against dives as well, or just protecting your team against getting engaged on. So if you have someone who's really fed, you have a Shin split pushing in the side lane, they can't deal with him, which is going to be very common on this patch. And the enemy team is trying to find an opportunity to engage on you 5v4 while Shin's splitting, then she's going to make it very difficult for them to do that. So she's just very, very good with split push comps and assassin comps. And the fact that she gives flat AD on her shield is really going to make the Zeds, the Talons, the Kianas, the Kha'Zixes, is going to make them hit like a truck, because you're basically giving them an extra BF sword whenever you shield them. So she is a bit weaker in the early game. Her shield's on a super long cooldown. She doesn't have an innate heal. She can poke pretty well with her W if you're against a melee champ. So she's one of the better champs into things like Nautilus, like Leona, because it's hard for them to engage on her because of the tornado, but then she can freely poke the ADC with the W, which is just point click through the minions, and does pretty good damage if you take either Airy or Comet, Scorch, sometimes even Cheap Shot if you want to go real hard. So she does have some early game aggression options, but she does kind of have a problem against some of the top end enchanters like Yuumi, Karma, and Soraka can all give her some problems in the laning phase and beyond, potentially. Okay, now to the new stuff here. We have ADCs. So I think that Ezreal is still going to be the strongest. He did get a nerf last patch, and I know his win rate for most people is not going to be that strong right now. He's the most pick support. He's only got a 49% win rate. But the thing is, a lot of people are auto-filled pick him, and a lot of people that just don't know what they're doing pick him. He still brings a ton to the table. He has really long range, ability to farm with the Q. He has poke damage. So that means that even if you're behind, you're probably still going to be able to farm. Sadie. You're probably going to still be able to farm. And later on in the game, if you're sieging or you're trying to protect an objective or whatever, he's got that just long range, just non-stop poke that can do quite a bit of damage later on. He has pretty good burst damage as well. If you see an opportunity, you hit him with the W, you can go in, W, Q, E in, auto attack Q, and it's pretty solid. You have good follow-up on engage too. You can just ult and it'll do a ton of damage. Your Leona engages, your Nautilus engages. Whatever the case is, you just ult and then you go in for that combo I just talked about and blow him up. So he's a nice combination of burst damage plus poke. His sustained damage is a little bit weaker, and he doesn't have like really high AoE teamfight damage like Ashe or Twitch or some of these like Hurricane users, Jinx. But nevertheless, he just brings a lot of utility. He's got the slow field with Iceborne Gauntlet, and he's going to be tankier, so he's hard to assassinate compared to other ADCs, along with the mobility. So if they have like a Kha'Zix or a Zed, or you just have a feeling you're going to get hard camped, or you're not sure if your support's actually going to peel for you or not, he's a really good option out there, especially with the Death Stance build. Once you get that Muramana plus Iceborne Gauntlet, you can go Trinity sometimes as well if they have a lot of squishies and you're not worried about dying. And then it's really that Death Stance instead of the Blade of the Ruined King that I think is making him pop off, because that just makes him almost impossible to kill. So very good sort of hybrid champ that is just really solid. Good YOLO Q player, where you don't have to worry about your support peeling you as much. You don't have to worry if your support's roaming a lot, or if you're going to get assassinated, or whatever the case is. He can do it all. So he is pretty skill intensive. You gotta have patience. You gotta time your E correctly, so you don't want to E forward and then die, which is what a lot of Ezreals do, unfortunately. But if you're peeling back, if you're consistently hitting, at least 50% of your Qs, you're probably going to do really well on him. Now, Ashe is the other one that almost everybody's going to recognize is really strong on this patch. And a big part of this is just her competition's been nerfed out. Most notably, Varus was hard nerfed a couple of patches ago. And so just having some kind of engage at the ADC slot It's pretty nice because that frees up your other roles to not have to take engage. So if you're taking assassins mid, Katarina, Fizz, Echo, Zed, like all those are popular and strong, and we'll talk about them in a minute. Just having somebody that can set that up with the arrow is handy, especially if you have an enchanter as well, who's not going to be able to start fights in the mid game. She just works really well in a lot of team comps because she does have the engage from the ADC role, which is rare. But then she also has pretty good pressure early. That slow makes her very, very good for gank assist. It's really hard to run from her if she starts slowing you and the jungler's coming in. She has that hawk shot, which is really good for tracking the jungle as well, getting a hold of those timings, just kind of knowing when you can be aggressive, when you can push. And she's got really good poke also. Her W does quite a bit of poke damage in the early game. And then her itemization is pretty solid as well. You got the Blade of the Ruined King plus Ruin's Hurricane. So she's pretty solid in team fights. She has long range, of course, as well. So she can just kind of hang really far back. The Hurricane is going to apply Blade of the Ruined King to all 3 targets. So it does a ton of damage in team fights. And it applies your slow to all 3 targets as well. And I believe it might apply your flurry to all 3 targets. I'm not 100% about that. But she just puts out a ton of team fight damage. She can engage. She can scout well. She's got slows. She's got a whole lot of utility. So that's why I think she's number 1 right now. She is a little bit vulnerable if something has a ton of mobility and gets a flank on her because she doesn't have mobility herself. Now, she can kite with her W and potentially the slows, and she can arrow someone in the face to buy some time. So, she can be vulnerable in that sense, but if you do have an ADC or a support, rather, that can give you some movement speed, especially like a Yuumi, a Lulu, a Karma, that type of stuff, then it does make it very easy to get out of situations like that and also to run people down and kite them. The change to the inspiration tree to give her, I think, 15% extra movement speed towards the target that you slowed is another thing that really bumped her up a few patches ago. So I still think that she's going to be very strong. Some people are playing Caitlyn a bit more as well. She is one of the highest pick champs right now. Is right up there with Caitlyn, and she hard counters Caitlyn because Caitlyn, like, she can match Caitlyn's range. She can, push and poke Caitlyn out early, potentially, and that arrow is just really hard for Caitlyn to dodge that. And she's going to scale better than Caitlyn in the mid game. She just has a much smoother power curve than Caitlyn does. So Ashe just historically hard counters Caitlyn, and I think that's still going to keep happening. Speaking of Caitlyn, before we move to Twitch really quick, I'm just going to say I don't have Caitlyn on here. She does have a much higher win rate right now, so it's possible I'm just biased against this, but she just requires too much skill, for a lot of people in most elo brackets. And, people may not think of Caitlyn as really high skill cap. It's like, well, she's got long range. All you do is just auto attack. But the problem is she doesn't do a lot of damage. Just auto attacking. You really need to hit your combos. You got to trap people. You got to get them with your net. You got to hit your Qs. She's basically a combo burst mage that just happens to be ranged. So you have to be able to set that stuff up, and most people just don't do it properly. Also, she doesn't have any steroids in her kit, so she doesn't have anything that increases attack power, or attack speed. She doesn't have any sort of AoE abilities. I mean, I guess she's got her Q, which is kind of AoE. Her ultimate you can't even really use in live combat. You have to use it either before or after fights to clean people up. Her CC is really limited. Her attack speed is very low. Base attack speed's like 0.56, I think. So she doesn't scale that well with Zeal items, but she needs to get Zeal items. At least rapid fire cannon. So she's okay, but you really have to, leverage her strengths and just hard push the lane, take those towers, and just snowball out of control. Because in the mid game, if you're not ahead after she gets her Infinity Edge, she's going to fall really far behind, because Ashe is going to be building Ruin's Hurricane, which is a massive pickup in DPS for team fights, and Caitlyn's going to be building Rapid Fire Cannon, which is still okay, but not that great. So Caitlyn does do a lot of damage once she gets to like 4 or 5 items, and 75% crit, 100% crit. Yeah, she does a lot from the long range, but before then, in like the 2 to 3 item range, that 15 to 25 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes, she's going to have some problems. So anyways, that's why I don't have her on the list. Although if you are very good at Caitlyn, if you're proficient, especially moving up the elo brackets once you get to Diamond Plus, I think that she can be pretty good. Okay, Twitch is one that I have on here that's not on a lot of radars, but I think, and his win rate is not like super high right now, but I think a lot of people are really underestimating him and perhaps not playing him correctly. Um, so several things are going for Twitch, I think. It says that his core build, if you build this build correctly, then it's going to be a 58% win rate, and then it's 64% once he gets to these two items. So if you build him correctly, then he can be really strong. So what is it about Twitch that makes him strong? Well, he's getting a bit of an easier laning phase, right? If you're up against an Ezreal specifically during the laning phase, or like a Kai'Sa, Vayne, stuff like that, you're probably going to get a free laning phase. And he scales super hard once you get that ultimate. And he has the invisibility as well, which is great for yellow queue, where people are just running around. You know, you have the opportunity to get people cut off. He's awesome with Yuumi, because when Yuumi attaches, she goes invisible with him, and then she gives him everything he wants. The movement speed to stick to people and get more poison stacks. She has the heal. She has the ultimate for the CC. Yuumi is just really, really OP with Twitch. It's super strong. Very good with Lulu as well, and both of those are two of the strongest champs right now. You know, for very similar reasons. Lulu speeds him up, gives him attack speed, gives him a shield, can protect him with the ult. So he just works really, really well with two of the most prominent ADCs right now. And there's a newer build on him too to help him come online a bit faster, which I was skeptical of at first, but I actually do think that it's quite good upon further review, is this Manamune into Hurricane on Twitch, because you can get this at 2,400 gold, and then you can get Hurricane, I think it's like 2,600. So yeah, for basically 5,000 gold, you have two completed big ticket items, and Hurricane apply, like each one of those Hurricane bolts can apply Muramana. So that's a lot of extra damage, and then your ultimate as well applies on hit damage at full strength to everyone that gets tagged by your ultimate. And this is why Blade of the Ruined King has been really good on him, because you're in theory you could hit like 3 people twice with Twitch's thing to double proc your on hit effects. Because if all 3 people are lined up and you shoot them straight down that line with your ult's going to hit all 3, but then 2 of the Hurricane bolts are also going to hit the other people, so they're getting double tagged for the on hit. And so that's obviously going to be really good. And Muramana puts out some really serious damage for a cheap price once you get it completed. Also, your it can get to quite a bit of AD. I don't remember exactly how much it gets. I'm not going to look that up just so we can keep this moving along. But it gets to quite a bit of AD, and his poison scales really well with AD. The Contaminate, the E, scales super well with AD. So yeah, you are kind of missing the attack speed from not having Blade of the Ruined King, because obviously he likes attack speed as well. But the attack speed doesn't scale with the poison, and the extra AD that you get off of Manamune does. So you not only get the on hit, but you get a much bigger finisher with your E. Also, because he's so long range, when you activate your ult, it gets 850 range, and so you're not going to be close enough to activate and really use the Blade of the Ruined King, you know, as much as someone like a Vayne would, who's going to be, you know, up in your face, you know, trying to stick to you, right? Twitch is just going to delete you from a distance. So that's why I think that Manamune has become a bit more popular. It is kind of a bit weaker in the early game, but if you're getting those steroids from your ADK or from your support, the Ardent Sensor, the Yuumi buff, the Lulu buff, whatever, it's still going to be good. And that's offset by the fact that it's 800 gold faster as well. So you can complete it, you can get online and do a lot of stuff. It also does help him wave clear a lot nicer too, because then you can just drop your little flask, you know, your W on a wave, and then just contaminate every wave and just clear it like super fast. So that does allow you to push, get priority, and then go roam with your invisibility. So I think it's a super good build. Like I said, it's a little wacky, you know, because he doesn't get a lot of mana items, but overall I think that it is pretty good, and a lot of people are having success with that on Twitch. So you just want to go Manamune, then Hurricane. Now a lot of people go Infinity Edge after that. That's probably the way to go. There's an argument maybe for going Blade of the Ruined King after that, because you're already going to have Hurricane and Manamune, and they stack up so well. But the thing with Twitch is, like, his ultimate shots can also crit, and the Hurricane bolts can crit, so crit works really well also, and it has a really big AD amount on it, so it has the 80 AD. So I think that's why, the same thing as Manamune, you just want a lot of AD because that works so well with your Contaminate. So I think that's why people go Infinity Edge third, and you just skip the Blade of the Ruined King. So if you're going that build, you also don't need healing as much if you have an enchanter like a Yuumi, a Soraka, stuff like that can heal you. You don't need the lifesteal as much. So we'll see. And you might even be able to itemize into some lifesteal. Usually he goes press the attack as his main main damage, but you could also go for like either Triumph. You probably want to go Presence of Mind with this build just so you get the extra damage off of Mana Immune. But you could go Bloodline if you want a bit more healing. I don't know. It's on the table. I'm not sure if you do it every lane. There might be some places where you need the lifesteal. If you're getting double poked out by like Senna, Caitlyn, or something, maybe you need to get the lifesteal. So I'm not sure if it's for every game, but look at this win rate over time, though, chart. Like, he just really takes off if you can make it to the mid to late game. And as far as win rates, it looks like the Mana Immune is becoming more popular. It does have a slightly lower win rate than Blade of the Ruined King, so we'll see. But overall, I think that he is in a pretty good place right now, and a lot of people really underestimate him, especially like gold and lower, where people are not going to respect that invisibility, and you have the ability to snowball super hard. Okay, Vayne is another one that I think is really strong right now. Now, Caitlyn is moving up in the meta, and historically, she is a hard counter to Vayne, but the Caitlyn has to be good enough to hard pressure you in the early game as well. She has to go up, put pressure on you, because once you get to 2 items, you'll probably be able to beat her if you can dodge her net and her Q. I think Vayne can outplay Caitlyn in 1v1 situations later on. So you can get pressured early, but you do have the lifesteal. You are going to be getting Blade of the Ruined King. You can take stuff in tough lanes, like Bloodline or Taste of Blood, or maybe even Biscuits or something. I'm not really sure. I think a lot of people probably just go for the Nimbus Cloak stuff. So you do take PTA. Looks like there are some people who are taking Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. So you can get some sustain, but then once again, if you have a Yuumi, a Soraka, or something like that, then they're going to give you a free lane. You're going to be able to sustain through most of what the enemy's doing and start scaling. Because once you get your Blade of the Ruined King and your Ginsus, it's very, very difficult to stop a competent Vayne in the late game because she has so much mobility. She's got the invisibility. She can run you down. She's just a solo queue warrior, a YOLO queue warrior. Right? Because she's just very good at showing up at these little skirmishes, outplaying people, and just murdering everybody late game. I mean, everyone's seen the Fed Vayne. So I just think that she is getting a bit more of a pass in the early laning phase, especially against Ezreal. She is super, super good against Ezreal because she can run him down. He has a really hard time kiting her because she's so fast, and she can use her Q on a low cooldown to dodge his Qs. So really hard counter to Ezreal, and extremely good against tanks. She's one of the best ADCs in the game against tanks. And you are seeing some of those tanks come back in, especially in the jungle role. You're seeing the Nunu, the Volibear, and even top lane, you're getting like pseudo tanks, right? You're getting your Darius, your Singe, your Maokai, Wukong, Shin. A lot of these champs that are just going to stack a lot of armor and be difficult to deal with. She's very good at those. So, in organized team fights, if you're up against like a Jinx who's super fed and throwing out, she's got 5 items and she's throwing out these rockets and melting your team, yeah, she potentially can get outscaled. But if both teams have a lot of tanks, then Vayne might be able to cut through those a little bit faster than the enemy ADC. It just depends. So, once again, kind of a tough matchup into Caitlyn. A little iffy against Ashe. You can dodge her arrow in the mid game and close the gap on her if you're good on Vayne, but you can get poked out by the Senna, the Caitlyn, the Ashe, a lot of those types of champs. So, and you can get pressured out by Jhin. So you got to be careful. Vayne's notoriously really bad in the laning phase, but if you do get free from that, then you can take over the game. Games are extending. She plays super well with Yuumi, Lulu, for the same reasons that a lot of these other top champions do, is she just puts out so much single target damage that if she gets ahead and you buff her up, like, she just leverages those stats so hard that it's just extremely difficult to deal with her. If, Lulu has her buffed up with Whimsy and Pix and Ardent Sensor, she's just going to be a machine gun. So that's difficult to deal with. And then finally we have Jhin over here. So Jhin still has a pretty high win rate, and he's good at pressuring some of these early game champs that are like champs that are weak in the early game. I mean to say, so like the Ezreal, the Twitch, and the Vayne that I think are all really strong. He can just kind of close the door on them and just do super well in the early game. He's great with poke champs like a Karma, like a Xerath, Vel'Koz. Is anything that's going to apply pressure. He does a lot in the early game. Now he kind of has a hard time against tanks later on because he just really doesn't leverage attack speed that well. But there are some comps. It's a pretty balanced meta right now. You might be seeing some comps that don't have that many tanks also. So like mid lane, for example, a lot of the really good mid laners right now are these assassin type of champs that you need to kill quickly, right? Like Katarina, if you're against her, you're not going to have time as Vayne to sit there and land 7 auto attacks to kill her, right? You need her dead instantly, and that's what Jen's really good at. So he's very good versus assassins just because he puts up enough upfront burst damage to where he might be able to kill them before they kill him. And then Fizz, Echo, and Zed are 2 more champs that are really strong that are problematic right now. And then you're seeing like Kha'Zix come back out of the jungle, Kayn, Master Yi still strong and popular to get down to those. So it just kind of depends on what's going on in the meta, but he is pretty good against them. He works pretty well with the enchanters. Now, obviously, Ardent Censor's not going to be that great on him, but Shurelya's is a pretty good item too right now as sort of a substitute for Ardent Censor. And someone like Yuumi does give him a lot of extra flat AD with her W, which is pretty handy, and he really does like the move speed as well. The buff to Boots of Swiftness a few patches ago is going to be really good on him as well, so he has potential. He's not necessarily my favorite, but I think a lot of ADCs aren't in a great spot right now, and he's one who definitely can make a bit of a difference. So he's my early game pick. If you want to go for the punish and try to snowball early, he's my pick. You could also play something like Caitlyn, Senna, Misfortune, Draven. All of those can also be early game punish ADCs, but I would, in general, with most ADCs, try to go for the scaling auto attacker, Ardent Censor 2.0 ADCs. But if you want to go against the grain and try to punish that meta early, he's one of the better champs for that. Okay, let's move on to mid lane here. I think that Katarina is still going to be super strong, very underappreciated right now. She's rocking almost a 54% win rate, and there are several things going on here. Number one, she just snowballs super hard. I mean, everybody knows that, right? So if you're having these 5-on-5 team fights, which are coming back to the meta, they are coming into vogue, and she starts to get a couple of resets, then she's just going to go off. And some of these ADCs are going to be a bit more vulnerable to her right now. You don't have, like, Varus. You do have Ashe, who does have an arrow to stop her. But, Varus is kind of sneaking out of the meta a little bit. Ezreal's been nerfed a bit. He's still very strong, but he has been nerfed a little bit. And you're not seeing the hard tank supports as much. And she's very good at... potentially really good, I'll say, against some of these enchanters, depending on what the matchup is, because not only are they really squishy and you can kill most of them pretty quickly, but often they don't have as much CC as something like a Nautilus or a Leona. Things like that are really kind of a nightmare for Katarina to deal with. That 5-second chain CC is tough, but if you're against something like a Karma, what's she gonna do? She doesn't even have a piece of hard CC to deal with you. Same thing with Yuumi. Very difficult for Yuumi to stop. I believe Yuumi's ult is a root, so it wouldn't even stop Katarina's channel if Katarina starts ulting. So Yuumi has no answer to her. Karma has no answer. Janna can, have an answer with her ult or a tornado. Lulu can polymorph. But if you just wait on Lulu and just watch for Lulu to, Whimsy, the ADC, to buff up the ADC, and then you roll in with Katarina when she doesn't have polymorph, she's going to have very limited options. So I just think that this shift over to enchanters being really strong does favor Katarina. And then she also has a built-in grievous wounds, a 60% grievous wounds built in. So that is very good against all the healing out there. Not only the enchanters, but there are so many other champions in the game right now that are taking Conqueror, Ravenous Hunter, Spirit Visage. They just have innate healing like Kayn, Aatrox. Boy of the Ruin Kings everywhere on a lot of champs. Twitch and Vayne are still going to get that a lot. You're seeing a lot of the bruisers top lane. The Sets, the Irelia, stuff like that are going to be taking Blade of the Ruin King. You got Nunu, Volibear. All of these champs are going to have a lot of healing. So the fact that you have a free 60% debuff on that is nice. And she just scales super hard off of single item power spike. I mean, all you need is Gunblade. And it's just off to the races, and you can just snowball the game out of control so hard. And you have some flexible items. You know, if you're afraid you might get bursted out, you can take a Death Stance second, which more and more Katarinas are doing. And that is pretty strong on her. But if you're just snowballing, you're really far ahead, you can also just go Death Cap straight up and just delete people that way as well. So there are a few different options in there. You'll notice that, yes, Death Cap second is the highest win rate, but that usually means that you are just like completely smashing them. But for most normal items that you might get, Death Stance is the strongest one by a very large margin. I mean, 60% win rate versus Zanya's being a 54% win rate, and it's way more expensive. So you would think that Zanya's would allow you to move up the power curve faster because it's more efficient, it costs less. But Death Stance is just so good because remember that most of your abilities also have an AD ratio. So you're still doing a lot of damage, but then you have those resistances and you have the healing combined with your Gunblade. So you just have all this healing, and the resistances combined with the delayed damage just gives you more time to get those resets and just heal your way through, get the Triumph procs, all that stuff, and just heal your way through a lot of these encounters. So I think that that's a super strong item right now on her, and a lot of people aren't getting it. As you can see, it's kind of popular, and you really, really don't need Morellonomicon. This is a very bad buy on her. Yes, the spell pin, the flat spell pin is good, but you already have Grievous Wounds, and that's the main reason to get Morellonomicon. You already have a 60% Grievous Wounds on your ult. You do not need this item. It does have a higher win rate than Zanya's, but I mean, I get, like, the spell pin is nice, I guess, and it does, if your ult's not up, it does give you some extra Grievous Wounds, I suppose, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. I think that if you're afraid you're going to get blown up, Zanya's gives you some outplay potential. But if you just want the raw, just get in there and just beat them down, get those resets, and just become, basically like a tanky assassin, death ball, then I think that Death Stance is going to be where you want to go. So anyway, super strong, snowballs really well, great itemization, just really good with kind of the shift over to enchanters and just the amount of healing with the free, like, super Grievous Wounds. I think is very good right now. Fizz is another one that's just kind of always under the radar. Like, a lot of people just never respect Fizz. This champion's really difficult to deal with. He almost always has a high win rate. And he's just got a low cooldown, all-in ult. If he hits you with the fish, you're probably dead. Yes, you can hourglass it. If it is a champ that does have hourglass, that is a possibility. But he just can get around so many mechanics with his hop. And it's such a low cooldown mobility that just does really high burst damage. So, he can just jump things. Like if Zed tries to ult him, he can hop on his trident, avoid a Zed ult. He avoids ganks really well because of that. It's really annoying for enchanters to try to deal with him. He can jump polymorph from Lulu. He can, jump and get around Yumi's ultimate. He can jump Janna's tornado. Like, there's just so many mechanics he can get around. He can jump like a Nautilus missile that's about to hit him. He can jump if Karthus is ulting and go untargetable and not get hit by Karthus. So his ability to go untargetable just cheats so many different mechanics in the game that it really puts him in a unique position as an assassin. And it's just the low cooldown and high uptime. Like, he's just constantly dashing around, jumping around, and he can still kill you even without his fish if he gets ahead. Couple that with his ability to get really cheap items like Proto Belt, like Zanya's Hourglass, which both of them give him additional outplay potential. If he has Proto Belt, then he can get in closer and just, attack you with his Q and hold on to the E if he doesn't need it. It can allow him to wave clear a little bit better so he can, push and go roam. And then, of course, Hourglass is great because you have low cooldowns, very high impact, high mobility spells, and that's exactly who you want to use Hourglass on. So I just think that he's positioned really well right now in the meta. Echo's another one, is very similar to a lot of these champs. These three champs all have a lot in common, which is high mobility, potential for cheap, really high impact early items, don't have to pay for mana, you don't need mana items with them, and they can just affect the game really early and snowball out of control. Now, Echo does have nice wave clear. He does require a bit more skill and setup and prep, to be able to land your stun. There is a bit more outplay, especially in the early game for the enemy, but he is very good against assassins too because he can get that second health bar, which I believe bypasses Grievous Wounds. It may not. if they already have Grievous Wounds on you, I guess it's gonna. I think it will reduce his healing off of his ult. But anyways, he's got a big shield. He has the potential for a really big stun. He has the outplay potential with the ult, which can also heal him up for a ton. Really high mobility with his E. Like really good in team fights too, because you can get a multi-target like 2-second stun, which is massive in team fights. And he just has a ton of movement speed as well, just to run down and catch some of these tricky champions like Ezreal, like Vayne. So he's got a lot of potential. Probably the highest skill cap champion on my list here. Zed's pretty high skill cap too, but and he just abuses the same stuff, just like Fizz, right? He's got Proto Belt, he's got Zhonya's Hourglass. I would just say that he's better at team fighting than Fizz is, and Fizz is potentially better against like hard CC comps, because Echo, if he does get CC'd and he doesn't get to press his ult, that's going to be a real feels bad. So if Lulu polymorphs him, you know, right when he's about to ult, or if Soraka silences him before he can ult, that's going to be a big problem. So his damage is not as easy to execute for maximum kill potential like Fizz, where you just, you know, hit your fish and just roll your hand across the keyboard and they're dead. But he is a bit more utility and a bit more sturdy later on in the game, especially in team fights. And then finally, or just the last couple here, and then we got to move on faster. We got Nunu. Now, Nunu's kind of a newcomer. People are figuring out how to play against him. His win rate is a bit lower, but he still hasn't been nerfed, and I think he is still quite good in the mid lane right now. He just has a lot of sustain with his Q chomp. He can push the wave really well with his W and just go roam and just sit on those side lanes over and over again. So if the enemy has very vulnerable side lanes, if they don't have a lot of peel, or if you think they're going to push up and pressure a lot, so if the bot lane is like maybe Senna plus Caitlyn, or Ashe plus Senna or something like that, and they're going to push your Vayne in and hard pressure her all lane, Nunu's a very good champion for that, because you can just, you know, push your lane and then snowball down there and really hard punish them. So it's just the perma roam, especially now that Twisted Fate is not banned, but basically taken out of the meta with those 2 huge nerfs, one to his W and one to Unsealed Spellbook, which is basically the TF rune. I think Nunu can fill that gap. So he does a lot of damage early, just like a lot of these champs. You know, he can get a cheap item, he can get Proto Belt, add some extra kill threat, and then Leandri's I think is really good. A lot of people don't get Leandri's, but if you want extra damage, a lot of his stuff slows. So he can do a lot of damage with Leandri's, especially to tanks. And then you can build him tanky later on. So he's a really rare champion that has these different qualities of heavy roam, heavy burst magic damage, but can transition into a utility tank later on. And he just brings a lot to the table, right? You have your Consume, which allows you to contest Scuttles, steal Drakes, steal Barons, things like that. Tons of healing, tons of like AoE CC with your ultimate, your snowball, your E. You can engage and start fights. You even have Blood Boil, which gives extra movement speed and extra attack speed to your ADC in team fights. So he just brings so much utility. I think he's the #1 jungler. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But I think that he can also be played really well mid lane right now, especially to punish some of these champs that aren't that strong in the early game, like Katarina, Fizz, and Echo, champs that don't have a ton of wave clear. Echo's wave clear is pretty good, but a lot of these other champs just don't have great wave clear in the early game, and so you can hard punish, push them in, and then just roam and put up a bunch of threat in the side lanes. So I think he's really good, still pretty underrated. Zed is the other one who has really kind of taken off since those buffs a couple of patches ago. So he has the highest pick ban influence over here, which is like how often is he picked, how often is he banned, and what's his win rate. So the higher all of these numbers are, they consider it more influential in the meta. Versus like obscure champs that have high win rates, but nobody picks them, nobody bans them. It's just like one tricks. This means like everybody's picking them, everybody's banning them, and they still have a high win rate. So that usually is an indicator that something's really strong. So Zed kind of fits into that mold. They did increase, I think, the movement speed on his Shadow, so now he can get away a lot better. He's safer. I think they lowered the cooldown on the W as well. And Zed is a kind of champ who does have pretty good wave clear, and he can just take over. He has such great access to the back line, and when some of these ADCs get fed and they have enchanters like protecting them, like Ashe, like Twitch, like Vayne, you need somebody that can get back there and blow them up, or you're just going to lose. So ADCs aren't insane in this meta right now, especially in the early game at lower elos particularly, but If they get going, they can be very difficult to stop. And so Zed is someone who can get back there reliably and put a ton of damage on that ADC and kill him. I mean, when he gets really fed, there's very little counterplay. Unless they have Hourglass or GA or something like that, it's going to be very, very difficult to stop him. And a lot of these Enchanter type of champs have a hard time protecting the ADC from someone like Zed. Someone like Rakan is super good because he's got the shield, he's got the knock-up. But, you know, someone like Yuumi isn't going to be able to do a lot. He's going to get in there and kill your ADC before you can even blink. You're not going to be able to CC him. Lulu is a pretty good option against him because you can, you know, use your ult, buff him up, and then polymorph him. So Lulu is someone who does do pretty well against Zed. But a lot of these other ones are going to have a bit of a harder time if the Zed does get fed. So supreme mobility, really high, like very fast one-shot potential on a low cooldown, and he can get in and get out in the same move pretty clean in a lot of situations. That's what makes Zed really, really strong. Versus like Katarina can get in there, she can get the kills, but she's not going to get away. She can get resets and kill a bunch of people in team fights, and that's where she outshines Zed a little bit. But in just kind of the YOLO queue, running around, just getting picks, trying to set yourself up for success, I think Zed is going to be a bit better. Fizz is the same deal. Like, he can kill people, but he can still get out pretty well, but not as well as Zed. So, anyways, I think Zed can do well. I just have him a bit lower just because he is AD. Among other things, he's hard to play. There is some counterplay. You know, if they do get Hourglass or if they can get a GA or something, there potentially could be some counterplay. You know, but the fact that he's AD does make him a bit more of a liability in my mind, because you might overload on AD if you do that. You know, your bot lane's probably going to be AD. Most of the top laners right now are AD. A lot of junglers are also AD. And so you're just going to have not enough AP threats. And if you stack too much AD on your team, they take Ninja Tabby and everybody just, you know, builds chain vests. It is going to be difficult to get through that with Zed because he is a lethality user. He does want to snowball early. So that's really one of the major knocks against him. And the fact that, you know, a champion like Ezreal is probably already going Iceborne Gauntlet, so he's going to have some natural resistances against that type of thing. And it's going to be extremely hard to kill something like Volibear or, you know, Nunu or things like that when they get a bunch of AD later on. So he is pretty good. Obviously, he has a high win rate. He's picked and banned a lot. He has some of the best backline access of anybody. You just got to be careful. You need to make sure you have an AP threat somewhere in your comp. So if you do have like a Singe top lane, or you have an AP jungler, you know, maybe Nunu. There's not that many like high profile AP junglers right now. Maybe Zac. I mean, if you do have like an Evelyn, Lilia, something like that, maybe you can make it work. But he's gonna be really good if you can make it fit in your comp. Okay, last couple of roles here, and then we'll call it a video. So Nunu, we just talked about Nunu. Really good in the jungle right now. Very safe clear. Extremely good ganks early. Like, I think that's really what sets him apart from some of the other tanks out there, is his ganks are insane in the early game. Especially kind of this new build where people are getting Phase Rush on him. They're taking Phase Rush, Relentless Hunter, Water Walking. They're just kind of going all in on that mobility. And it's so hard to stop, especially once you take the like, look at that win rate. Now, he does fall off a lot late game in some circumstances, but this is still saying Aftershock. I've seen a lot of Phase Rush Nunus. That's what most people are running, and I think that is really, really good on him, because it just basically guarantees you're going to hit your root off of your E if you have Phase Rush. But anyways, once you get that scuttle, you just come in like a million miles an hour. You have, like I said, Relentless Hunter, Water Walking, Phase Rush, just all of this movement speed stuff. You come running in. It's super hard to dodge that engage. Even if they flash half the time, if you have enough turn radius, you can still hit them with the snowball anyways. So there are some very specific counters they need to deal with him. And some things are very good, like Soraka's very good against him. That silence, your snowball counts as a channeled ability, so the silence will turn it off. And there are a couple of other champs that can make it difficult for him to get through them. I mean, like Anivia, Trundle. Trundle's out of the meta too, which is very good for tanks in the mid lane right now. But he just got a lot of really strong ganks. great, clear. His dueling is not amazing early on, but you can usually just avoid other people. He secures objectives really well with his Chomp plus Smite, means you're pretty much always going to get the objective. So you can, try to go for it. Even if the enemy jungler is hanging out on the other side of the wall, they're going to flash it and go for a Smite on Baron, on Dragon, whatever. You're still going to get it, 9 times out of 10. He's got really good sustain. As I mentioned earlier, he has Blood Boil to buff up your ADC. So if you already have a Yuumi with Ardent Sensor buffing up your Vayne, well, now you've got Nunu to add an extra buff on there later on. So he's got that utility. He's very versatile itemization. You pretty much always get Cinder Hulk, but if you do want to roam around a lot and kind of triple down on that movement speed, you can get Dead Man's Plate. You can also go Spirit Visage if they do have a lot of AP threats. You can go Leandries if you're snowballing and you're really far ahead. I still think Leandries is a very viable option on him. Lots of CC in team fights, really high base damage on his ult if they don't CC you. So he's just really good. I mean, there's virtually nothing wrong with this guy. He's just like the perfect jungler right now. One of the only things is sometimes you can have a hard time accessing the back line. So if they do have, the Hyper Fed, they have the Vayne with the Yuumi, or they have the Twitch, with the Lulu or something like that, he's going to have a hard time getting back there and dealing with that. But most tanks on this list are. I mean, Volibear can run at him and then ult on the back line, and maybe that'll help a little bit later on. But he just comes online really fast, too. Like, people take Proto Belt, too, if you want a cheap, snowball item. So he just immediately influences and has a big impact on the game right away. So I just think he's super good right now. You could even take Ardent Sensor on Nunu if you don't have an Ardent Sensor support, because he does really well with the movement speed. He has great AP ratios. He scales really well with plus healing and shielding because of your Q and because of the new shield on your ultimate. And with Font of Life, whenever you slow somebody with your E or your Snowball or your ult or whatever, they auto-attack, you're applying the Ardent Sensor buff to everybody. So I think there's a world where you could even go Ardent Sensor instead of Proto Belt, potentially. You are going to be a bit squishier, you don't have health, so, that is a thing. But if you do have a really fed ADC, your Vayne gets 2 kills in the laning phase, and you're like, okay, I want to play around that person. But you've got a Leona or something down there that's not going to get Ardent. You could get it on Nunu. I'm not saying you should get it every time, but it's on the table. And that's just the thing with Nunu, is it's like almost everything's on the table. Third item, you could rush a Knight's Vow to help protect your ADC. You could get a Locket to help, against AoE teamfight damage later on. You could even get a Redemption if you want to, double down on the team fighting. Like, he can go the support items if he wants to, or he can go the big tank items. The little, niche support items are kind of weird. You don't do that all the time, but if you need a specific power spike window, you're going for that third dragon, you got 2100 gold, you just want something strong, you could go for Redemption, on certain back timing. So anyways, you've got a lot of potential. Okay, so Volibear is another one that is really strong right now. He's getting a lot of attention. He's, I think, the most contested jungler right now in Pro. Still has a pretty high win rate in solo queue. 10-14 here. Yeah, so I don't know why they didn't nerf him. He has a 63% win rate and an 87% presence on 8-14. Even on 8-13, or 10-13 rather, 52% win rate, 75% presence. So he's very, very strong. He can flex, he can go jungle, he can go top. And there's just a lot. It's kind of like Nunu. There's just a lot of different things you can build on him to be effective. You can adapt to different situations. He does have a really safe, strong clear in the early game. His ganks aren't as good as Nunu. Nunu comes in super fast. Volibear kind of just has to run in. But Volibear is going to be a lot better at dueling people early on than Nunu is. And in the jungle, once you get that Trinity Force, you just do such an extreme amount of burst damage when you jump on people. He does have an easier time getting to that back line too. You can just, Q, run forward, and then just ult, land on that back line, and just delete the ADC if you have Trinity and they're not that fed. So he's got a lot of utility. He is very tanky. He's difficult to kill. He brings a lot to the table. I just think he's going to be very strong. I mean, the biggest thing is his dueling potential. Like, he can sit there in team fights and just blast other bruisers and tanks, particularly if you're getting buffed up by like a Yuumi or a Lulu or something. That's where it is he can put in that damage, he can put in that work by himself in team fights, versus Nunu is just a lot more kind of like CC utility type of champ. Volibear is going to, bring the pain. So I think that he still is going to be quite strong as well. Kha'Zix is kind of the new YOLO Q wonder after last patch. He's been going up a lot in win rate, and it's just a lot of extra damage. I think his ratio got increased to like 1.2 on his unseen threat. Something got buffed up with his isolation damage. And, you know, with the prevalence of some of these squishy champs coming back into the meta, you know, you're seeing the enchanters a lot more. In mid lane, it's basically all assassins being played. He is going to be quite strong. Now, a lot of the junglers are still on the tanky side, and then a lot of top laners are still on the tanky side, but he's finding a lot of targets. He has really good burst damage. He does have that backline access that I keep talking about, so he can go invisible, jump over walls, and just delete the Twitch or delete the Jinx or whatever. So he does have that going for him, and he's just really good at cleaning up fights. So he's good with some of these other assassins, you know, that can maybe get people low or can pick off one person, and then all of a sudden you're snowballing. You've got a 5v4. He can run down and kill some more people. So pretty good champ. He's got the invisibility. He has a really brutal slow if you update it, which I think is kind of the meta right now on Kha'Zix, is to upgrade, evolve that W, so you get the really big slow earlier on. Brings a lot of utility to the team, or a decent amount of utility to the team. So he's still going to be really strong right now. Kayn is another one. I think Kayn's really good. Both blue and red. Obviously, red is what most people go. It does give you kind of the tanky, sustain, bruiser, team fighter type of champ. But I think even blue, for the same reason that I just was talking about Kha'Zix being strong, I think blue in this meta can be good too. You know, you got the squishy enchanters. You have the squishy ADCs becoming a lot more popular. Squishy assassins in the mid lane. So I think that blue Kayn, and he's just so fast, and he's able to run around in these YOLO Q comps. So he can be a good counter to these, you know, double assassin comps if you can get ahead and like assassinate the assassins. Basically, he's going to be really strong. He has a lot of outplay potential with his ult. He can dodge a lot of things that enemies might be trying to do. Like he can, you know, dodge fizz fishes. He can play around like a Karthus ult. He can play around Zed ults. So he has a lot of potential to outplay other things in the same way that Fizz does. So I think he's going to be potentially really good right now. And you have different options. Once again, you can go for the assassin build or you can go for the red build. So he's a pretty good blind pick if you're an early pick on the jungle. And then Master Yi, I still think is really good. You just kind of always got to mention Master Yi, especially for gold and lower. Still snowballs super hard. If you are against an assassin, that can be kind of rough in the early game because he can get bullied, he can get invaded, but he can also offer solutions to cracking through some of these tanks later on in the game. So Master Yi always has to have a little bit of respect, just because the ultra snowball potential is there. But you could substitute him out. There are several pretty good junglers right now. I mean, you could put Graves in there. I think Graves, I don't remember if he got a nerf or if he's just kind of fallen out of the meta a little bit, but you can run Graves in there as well. And be pretty effective. Like Fiddlesticks is still pretty good. Vi is kind of always there on the fringes. A lot of people don't talk about her. She could be good. I mean, Karthus can be pretty good as well. I personally don't like Karthus because you have to kite camps, power farm. I mean, maybe Karthus just is a better version of Master Yi right now. It's not as good against tanks, but better against squishies. Better team fight potential. So, you know, either one of those, if you want a hard power farm jungler that scales well, yeah, Master Yi or Karthus are probably the way to go. And then the last group here that I'll talk about is going to be top lane. I still think that Darius is the strongest right now. The buffs to Ghost over the last couple of patches have been massive for him. You know, if he gets ahead, everyone knows he's just so difficult to stop. He's good against tanks. He's good against squishies. He can 1v2 if the jungler tries to gank for him. He's just the most dangerous top laner, I think, if he snowballs and gets ahead. And particularly with a lot of these other champs, and his ban rate reflects that. A lot of these, you know, movement enhancing champs. You know, you've got the Yuumi, you've got Lulu that can speed him up, Karma can speed him up, you can get a Shirelia's on a lot of different supports and speed him up. So he has a lot of stuff to help him get that stickiness in fights that he wants, and just delete people. And if you keep him alive, he's the type of champ that's going to be able to, you know, 2v5. Basically, if you just have a support Yuumi on him or whatever, and you can just keep him up, he's got the healing, he's got the resets. He's kind of like a tankier Katarina, sort of the top lane, where in just team fights, if she stays up, if Darius stays up, you're going to win the fight. So I think he is very good right now, especially with the Ghost. Now, I do think that the Trinity is still really strong on him. I don't know what else he gets. Maybe Deadman's second or third. He's got a lot of options. You can go Sterix as well for a little more defense. Obviously, Spirit Visage for the extra healing, especially if you have a healing Enchanter, can be good on him. So yeah, really strong champ right now. Doesn't split push as well. He can, and he can beat people up depending on how fed he is, but he is vulnerable to ganks if he does fall behind. He is vulnerable if he's trying to split push. He doesn't have any movement capabilities. He just basically has to turn around and fight. So he does have some weaknesses, but he's so scary if he gets ahead. Singe is another one that's like nobody ever respects this champion, but his win rate did go down a little bit on this patch. But he's another Ghost abuser. He's really good with Ghost. He's very, very good against tanks in the top lane. I think he has a good win rate against Darius as well. So there's just not a lot that hard punishes him. Maybe the range champs early on, but if you look at like his strong against champs here, he's good against almost everything. I mean, if you look at like what is he weak against, what does he have less than a 50% win rate against? And it is some of these range champs. It's your Quinn, your Vlad. I'm really shocked that Ornn's actually good against him. But like your Urgot, your Kennen, stuff like that. But anything that's not Jace, anything that's not these champions, he's going to have a 50% plus win rate against. So that's, all of these other top picks are not going to be in here. So he's got good win rates against most champions out there. So it's like, yeah, he can potentially be kited. He doesn't have the strongest team fight presence, but he just puts so much pressure on the map, and he's just so annoying to deal with. And like he's just so good against tanks because you have the Rylai's and the Leandries. They can't catch you. You can just keep slowing them down with your goo and just run in circles around him. With Conquer, you're going to be healing up. He's very, very good right now. And I mean, you can function in team fights too. I mean, you run in, you throw that goo down, it stops a lot of the mobility on champions, and especially if you get a flank, you can do a lot of damage in fights. So, and he's an AP threat, and I think that's really important. Like I just mentioned with Zed, kind of the inverse is true here. He can be an AP threat where a lot of these other top laner champs are not AP. So if you have an AD middle or an AD jungle, you need some AP top. Singe can definitely serve that function. So I think he's one of the few tanky AP champs that I like in the top lane. Maokai's another one who kind of serves a similar role, and a lot of people are sleeping on Maokai. He did get nerfed a couple of patches ago, but they've been nerfing some of his competition in the top lane. And just the way the meta is shaking out with enchanters being so powerful down in the bot lane, you just really want in the top lane a lot of tanks that can do very well in team fights, potentially, and that do really well with enchanters. So Maokai is definitely up there. He's got a 53% win rate, one of the highest win rate top laners right now. Still a pretty low play rate, virtually no ban rate, but he's just solid. Once you get Grasp, a defensive boot, and Sunfire, it's just really hard to push him out of lane. He has excellent gank assist. You just flash on somebody, W, they're probably dead, even if they manage to flash out afterwards. You've got your ult rolling in. You can displace him with your Q. He's just so sticky, right? It just provides so much CC in team fights, for ganks, all this stuff. It's just like, even if he falls behind, he's still super useful. So I just think Maokai is really good right now. And I think people are just going like Sunfire, Spirit Visage, yeah, just a bunch of tank stuff. And he has high base damages too. Like these seeds do really well, especially if you're fighting in the jungle or anything like that. He can start doing up to 16% max health damage AoE on people. His Q does really high base damage. It's like 250 AoE damage, so puts out pretty respectable damage with no items. And it's just a tanky machine. He's just a monster. So I think he's very, very good in a lot of different team comps. Wukong's another one here. He has been nerfed a little bit over time, but still provides a lot of utility. He provides that crushing armor on his Q so that your entire team does more physical damage to your target. So it's great for helping to take down tanks. A lot of people do go Trinity Force on him. I think that Black Cleaver is still a decent option as well in team fights. It stacks up super fast with his ultimate. But if you do just want to burst people out and have that hard trade potential, Trinity Force can work really well. And he's just good with a lot of these bruiser items. The Trinity, the Death's Dance, Blather and King's probably not terrible on him. I don't think a lot of people get that on him. But he's just really good with a lot of these bruiser type builds. Yeah, Blather and King, if you want that for some reason, that's like 59%. So just a really good bruiser champ with a lot of CC and a lot of utility, with the double knock up on your ult, the crushing blow, your couple of different abilities to jump, your outplay potential using the clone. So you've got a lot of options there to have a high impact. And then Shen's the final one that I'll mention. Shout out to Sammy there. I know Sammy loves Shen. But he did get a very significant buff on this patch, 20 extra shield. Especially early on, you can really all in and punish a lot of these other melee picks in the top lane with the extra 20 shield. And then just very good split push. You know, you just get your Sunfire and then Tiamat, and you can just push down lanes really quickly. And then, of course, you have the ability to rotate over to team fights as well. So you can split push, but you basically have 2 teleports to go with that. So I'm not 100% sure how he duels some of these other ones. Like, if he can beat Darius, probably not. Or if he can beat Malachi, I'm not really sure. But I do think that it's certainly worth taking a look at him again, just because he's historically, when he's good, he is a very good split pusher, very good duelist, and he can show up to those fights later on. So I think he's really good, especially if you have a more coordinated type of team at higher elos, or you're on comms with somebody or whatever, or if you're just really good at looking and communicating with pinks when you're about to ult in, letting people know when you have your ult, and giving them that confidence that you're going to ult in and save them. So very good champ. It's hard to buff him too much because he can be really strong in solo queue, or in pro play rather, but nevertheless, he's pretty good right now. That's pretty much it. There are a lot of good things in the top lane too. I think that Garen is still pretty good. You know, things like Kled are still a little bit undervalued. They're pretty strong. Kind of like with Katarina, Kled can apply that 60% healing debuff for free with his bear trap on a rope. So I think there are quite a few different things that are good top lane, but this is a good place to start thinking about it. Okay, well, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.